With the release of Topaz Clarity recently, we now have 13 Topaz products. So while each program uses very unique technology to achieve a specific task, it's sometimes difficult to remember which program should be used before or after another. So I just put up in front of you a workflow chart that we're going to be covering here shortly. And then we're going to be going into certain images and walking through specific workflows for each one. And then we're going to have more of an extended Q&A session so I can really answer all of your questions that you might have over specific workflow options. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the chart that we're looking at right now. Within our Topaz lineup, we have our own host program, we have technical programs, we have photo effects software where you can do more photorealistic type of effects with maybe a little bit of more stylization. And then we have artistic effects, some detail and output sharpening type of programs. And then we have some specialized programs such as masking tools and star effects, which is actually adding something into your image. So if we start over here all the way on the left, you'll see I have us starting off with Photo Effects Lab. Photo Effects Lab is basically the one-stop Topaz area that you can and use. It gives you instant access to all of your Topaz plugins, and it's a searchable effects library of all the different effects that you're going to find in all of the programs that you have on your system. It does have a layered workflow available, so if you're familiar with layers and you'd like to use layers, this is a layered program. And then it has built-in masking and some other tools as well. So this is a great host for your Topaz program. So if you do not have Photo Effects Lab, trust me, it does not change the workflow that we're going to continue to talk about. But if you do use Photo Effects Lab as your first stop, this is going to be at the beginning of your Topaz workflow. Next up is the first tier of programs here, and I have the technical fix type of programs here in this tier. That's going to include In Focus, which is a capture sharpening program. It's one of the most brilliant capture sharpeners. It also will help de-blur slight image blur in your image if you have that. So it might be great for that, but it's always good for capture sharpening. And then we have Denoise, which is a noise reduction program specific for high ISO image noise. And it is a fantastic noise reduction workflow within there. It's very exact and you can get some really good results. And then we have DJPEG, which is going to help you deal with any JPEG artifacts that you might have within your image. This is great if you're going to be working with older images that you've taken with digital cameras, you know, some of the first line of digital cameras that were coming out when JPEG artifacts were a pretty consistent issue that you had to deal with. And also if you have a low resolution type phone images, things like that, DJPEG is a great tool for. So once you go through these, if you need them, remember, just because we have 13 programs within our Topaz lineup does not mean you have to use every single one of them. I have never used every single one of my Topaz programs during one image workflow. So we'll be going over several different types of workflows, you know, going from Photo Effects Lab to Denoise to maybe black and white effects to detail, or Photo Effects Lab to In Focus to Clarity to Clean to detail. So this is just the first tier, these technical fix type plugins. Next tier comes the photo effects plugins, and this is going to include our black and white effects, which is a black and white conversion tool. It allows you to create these really stunning black and whites because it has all these different versatile tools that can give you certain types of effects you're after, whether it's more traditional, historical processed black and white effects, HDR, or stylized effects. So definitely an effects software. Then we come down to Adjust. Adjust is really the program that we are best known for, Topaz Adjust. It is the easiest way that we have to make your images just pop and kind of get that more HDR stylized effect. It works with adaptive exposure. It's a creative exposure tool. It helps to manipulate color and detail just a bit. So we'll go in there as well. A ton of presets to start off with in both of these black and white effects and adjust. Then comes Topaz Clarity. Clarity is our latest release, and Clarity is going to allow you to intelligently and naturally enhance your image contrast. So if you're wanting to create something that has a little extra punch or little dynamic pop, but you don't want to push it more towards an effect, you want to stay very natural and just give it that little extra something, Clarity is a great tool. We'll be talking about that as well. Then we have lens effects on this last program within this tier. Lens Effects simulates a wide range of lenses, filters, and specialty camera effects, and it does some amazing bokeh creation. We are going to be looking at that today as well. So that's the second tier of programs. Again, you don't have to use them all, but if you do, I do suggest you use them from black and white effects to adjust. Doesn't really matter which one of these goes first or second, then Clarity, then Lens Effects. We'll talk about why shortly. The next tier is going to be artistic effects. And this is, we have two programs that really will manipulate the pixels and create photo digital art, basically. So that you have Clean up there on the top. And Clean will give you really unique edge stylizing capabilities, so you can easily create things like cartoons or some curlicue type of leaves and trees. We'll go into all the different effects. So anything where you're going more towards the artistic side would be in this particular tier. We also have Topaz Simplify, where you can turn your image into a photo painting or a sketch or different types of artistic effects. Both of these programs, both Clean and Simplify, can be used for more subtle effects. Clean is amazing on portrait imagery. It does some great things just by cleaning up the skin. Simplify, you can take out very small image detail, just kind of cleaning up certain things, removing some detail that you didn't necessarily need, and we'll talk about that shortly as well. And then we have, lastly, within this particular workflow, Topaz Detail. Topaz Detail is the most advanced detail program or detail manipulation that we provide within our Topaz lineup. It will separate your image detail into several different sizes and allow you to manipulate and make each size of detail stand out. It is fantastic for output sharpening as well, and that is why it is at the end of the workflow, which output sharpening should always be done at the end. We also have in the lower right-hand corner Star Effects and Remask. Remask basically can be plugged into wherever you want to go. Perhaps you want to use it at the very beginning of your workflow, even like right after you get into your host program. And then you just want to work on one of the layers that you masked out or something. Or you can use it at the end or somewhere in the middle. Star Effects, same thing. Star Effects is actually adding an effect into your image. It's not just changing what's already in there. It's actually adding in certain types of effects. So you can add it in at the beginning, and then anything you added in will be manipulated along with the rest of your image, or you can add it in at the very end so it's not manipulated. The effect that you add in isn't manipulated. We'll go into that as well. So let's go ahead and jump on into some of these programs and talk about certain workflows. I am going to keep the questions dialog box up as we go along during this session, so I kind of see any questions and try to answer them as we go along, because I think it's more important that we answer them while we're in that particular workflow. Let's go ahead and jump on into the program here. I am going to use Photoshop CS5 as my initial host program, but I am going to go into Photo Effects Lab, so we go ahead and follow that workflow as much as possible. Let's start with something that needs a little bit more of a technical fix. So we can use that first tier of programs. Again, that first tier of programs, InFocus, denoise, and DJPEG, aren't necessarily going to be used for every single workflow. It's if it's needed. If we take a look at this image up close, this is actually shot at a very high ISO to provide an example of horrible image noise going on here. And so we are going to take this image into detail first, denoise first, and then continue on with the workflow. So let me go ahead and first go into, okay, so hopping on into denoise, because this image obviously needs a lot of technical help, I'm going to scroll out to 100% and just work with denoise real quick. I'm not going to go over every single thing with the program because we are talking about image workflow itself, not each individual program, but I will at least try to do the best job I can in a very quick way. Denoise is going to allow you to work with very, very heavy image noise like this, and it gives you several different preview modes. You have your RGB mode, which is your normal mode, but then you have your luminosity mode, your color mode, your red mode, and your blue mode. This is going to allow you to look at your image in several different ways, so you can look at all the different types of noise going on and determine or make sure that every single viewing mode is at the best that it can be. I'm just going to open this on up and go through it real quick. You have your overall strength of noise reduction. As I take this up, you'll see that the noise will start going down. With the overall strength, you will just be focusing on that mid-range, that middle gray type of tonality, not the shadows and not the highlights. Here's before, here's after. With all of the programs that we have, you can go to your before and afters. Here's before and after by using your spacebar or your left mouse button. That is consistent within all of our programs. Something to help you with your workflow tools and workflow steps are your shortcut keys. Each program has significant amounts of shortcut keys that you can find in the each user's guide. You can access every user's guide from within the menu button on the lower left-hand side of each of our programs. Just going to keep working here on my noise while I'm pretty quickly. Let's go into that red color mode and just hurry up here. Now if you just have a little bit of image noise, just a tiny, tiny bit, I wouldn't necessarily take it into denoise. Sometimes it is really great and it'll get rid of it in a heartbeat, but this is really, it shines for this high ISO. You will probably be able to work with very light image noise within your host program. Okay, just quickly working with this here. I'm going to put on some horizontal banding and vertical banding. I see some banding happening there. And let's look at what's going on back in our RGB mode at normal brightness. Here's before, here's after. Now I am going through this very quickly, so please know that I would probably work with this a little bit more as far as color and detail recovery and everything like that, but we are just kind of scooting on through this. I'll do a little bit more strength here and go into my detail recovery. Here's before, here's after. Cover my detail. And maybe reduce a tiny bit of blur and definitely add some grain to get some more natural effect in. I've taken out a lot of noise, so it might cause a little bit of flatness or within the image. When you add that grain back in, as you move into the other programs, it will start to feel much more natural. Here's before, here's after. Not super interested in perfecting this, and I'm just going to say OK. And now I have a good place to start to actually add in effects and color adjustments, contrast adjustments. If I would have tried to do that with this particular image before I went through denoise, I would have been manipulating the noise. That's why your technical plugins are on that first tier, because you don't want to manipulate the noise or any problems that your images might have before you actually, or you don't want to do that before you try to reduce the noise, because it'll make it that much harder. So let me show you this one more time. Here's before and after. Okay, I'm just going to make another copy and we're going to move on. Let's take this, let's look at this image and decide what we want to do with it. Okay, I think I'm going to go into adjust with this particular program. I just want to give it a little bit of pop and a little bit of stylization, a little bit of HDR, but not too much. So let's, or pseudo HDR, excuse me. Let's just take it into adjust 5 first and see what we're going to do. I like the classic collection for images that I don't want to push too far, but still give that extra little kind of stretch that dynamic range and get a little bit of creative exposure going on. So I'm just going to go through these particular presets and, ooh, I like that one, Brilliant Warm. That's quite nice. Here's before. Here's after. Again, before and after. If I go into my global adjustments over here, I can, on the right-hand side, you have your adaptive exposure. Really quickly, the majority of our effects programs in the second tier, actually all of the programs within our effects tier, have the same sort of setup. We do have some different interface styles going on right now because we like to try to improve and improve and improve. So our latest one, Topaz Clarity, has a much more modern, much more sleeker feel than Adjust 5 here, but it's set up in the exact same way with your presets and your effect collections over here on the left, your main preview area in the middle, and all of your adjustment stuff on the right. And within each program, the majority of the time, the first couple sliders are going to be that really core technology behind the program, and that applies and adjusts as well. So within my global adjustments, which is my first area that I can adjust, if I open that up and I go into my first tab, adaptive exposure and regions are going to be where this program really sets itself apart from other color, contrast, and detail programs. Basically what this does is it separates your image by region, physical regions, which is set by your region slider, and then as you take your adaptive exposure up, it will locally adjust your exposure. So you can get very localized exposure adjustments. As you take it up and you increase and increase, you'll start to get an almost pseudo HDR-like feel if you take it really high. It'll really start opening up those shadows, darkening those highlights, and give you some really unique feeling to it. I am going to leave it a little bit higher than this preset allowed. Maybe take my regions down just a little, take my exposure up. Here's where we started, before and after. Again, before and after. Now I know in my head, because I have Topaz Detail and I love Topaz Detail, I also have Topaz Clarity. It's my new favorite contrast enhancement program. Obviously, I love it. But because I already know this, I know that I'm really not going to worry about my contrast all that much and really getting this specific within Adjust. I'm also not going to want to affect my details really heavily within this program because I know I'm going to be doing my creative output and creative sharpening within Detail. So one thing to keep in mind as you go through these different workflow, different workflows, these different for each image, figure out which programs you think you might use. And so when you go into a program like Adjust that actually does have some adjustments available for you for both contrast and detail and color, different things like that, just make sure if you know that you're going to be going into detail, know that you will have a lot more control within Topaz Detail to manipulate that creative detail, which I'm going to use that. And I'm actually going to take out the detail enhancements that we've done within this particular program. I'll leave that on though. Okay. And I'm just going to say okay. So we still have a little bit of color problems happening down here, a little bit of, but it's a lot better than where we started. So here's where we started. And here's where we are now. I'm going to go ahead and make another layer here and take it into Topaz Clarity. A lot of people have been questioning which program do I use first if I now have both, if I have Topaz Adjust and Clarity. I have been finding that using Clarity after Adjust is better for me. I think it does. I think Clarity adds really beautiful punch to some images that just have that very hint of HDR type of an effect. Can really enhance that whole effect. So I'm just going to take a look at what we have here, and actually I'm going to go into my general collection. Within Clarity and within majority of the programs, we have a ton of presets here for you to play around with. It's a great place within each individual program to start your workflow from within that session. I'm just going to scroll down and see what might work for me. I'm thinking more of a low contrast or even a micro contrast would do some interesting things. Maybe low. Let's do low contrast boost 2. Oh, beautiful. Okay, here's before and here's after. Really just added a little bit of punch, but it stopped adding that stylization that we were adding within Adjust when we were taking that effect up. So this will take it and give you even more punch without trying to continue some sort of an effect. So this is really nice, actually. I'm going to come over to my dynamics area and just open up my shadow areas a little bit and put a little bit more detail, or not detail, but contrast into my micro contrast. Here we go. Here's before, here's after. There we are. I'm now going to press OK and get back into it. So now let's look at where we started and where we've gone. My next step for me after this is just Topaz Detail, and then I'm done with this particular workflow. I'm pretty happy from where we started to where we've gone. So let me show you before. Here's before. Here's after. This is a little bit flat. It turned a little bit cartoony, especially because I just did so much smoothing out with that original noise reduction. So I'm excited to see what I can add in Topaz Detail to kind of get a little bit more realistic stuff in there. So I'm just going to go to Topaz Detail 3. And again, you'll see that it is a very similar workflow within each program as well, with your collections on the left, presets, and your preset preview in the middle, and your adjustments on the right. Now this plugin pre-processing pop-up that you see for detail is completely normal, and if you have an out of the camera raw image like I'm working with here, I don't know that it's raw, but it was saved, I believe, as a TIFF, so it's the original size though. And I haven't reduced it for this session. So that's why it took a little bit longer. But the good thing is once it has gone through that pre-processing type of behavior right there, it's super fast within the session. And what that pre-processing does is breaks your image down into all these different sizes of detail. So you can come in, you can work with just your small details. Over here on the right, you'll see that. Oh, wow, we really need to get on into the image to check out and see what's happening with that small detail. So small detail, if you're not careful with this small detail, as you can see, it almost acts like it's adding in image noise because it's taking a look at all those tiny, tiny, tiny image details and working with that. But if I work with my medium-sized details, it's going to be a little bit larger. It's not going to be so noise-like. And then large details, even more so, is going to be much more structure-like details versus that texture detail that you'll see in that small detail. For this, I'm going to come over to my Creative Detail collection. Just take a look at some of these presets. Here's before, here's after. I'm really liking some of this micro contrast enhancement, just giving me a little bit more realism going on. I like this overall detail light. Ooh, overall detail medium. Let's take a look at that. Here's before and after. You can tell just on the tips of this fence, again, before and after, things that just start to stand out and it feels a little bit more realistic. But it does feel a little too much for me, so I am going to come to my overall opacity down here in my effect mask, take it down just a notch. This is very subtle. Again, this is my last step in my workflow. I'm just getting that final touch of detail exactly where I want it and pressing OK. And now I'm where I want it to be. Now I would do some extra work within this, this lower right area when we were in denoise in the beginning. But you can see how far we've gone. Here's before and after. Let me scroll on in. There we go. Here's before and after. Now this was using, just in case I had somebody asking here, this first layer was denoise. The second layer was adjust. The third layer was clarity. And this last one was detail. Now this is the type of workflow that I'm finding that I would use for a high ISO image, but the adjust, clarity, detail workflow, those three I find I use quite a bit as its own workflow without the denoise. But let me show you one more time where we started. Here's where we started. After denoise, after adjust, after clarity, and a little bit of detail. All right, so let's take a look at another workflow, and this time we're going to use a remask. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a quick background copy. And what I'd like to do with this particular image is work with the overall hue and saturation levels of this foreground. Everything looks a bit too red to me. I want to fix that and open it up a little. I also want to add in a sunsetty type sky. If I knew looking at this that I wanted to add in the sky, I'm going to go ahead and add in the sky first. So that's just my particular workflow. So let's go ahead and first cut out the white sky. So I'm going to go Filter, Topaz Labs, Topaz Remask. So instead of going to that technical fixes type of first tier of the workflow that you see here, I don't really see any need to do in focus, denoise, or DJPEG for this particular image, but I do see a need for remask. I'm just putting it right here on this particular area right now. Let's get rid of that and go ahead and just mask this out really quickly. Now many of our tools do have masking tools available for you, so if you are more comfortable with some of those masking tools, such as with Topaz Clarity, it has a great new color range mask tool available in there. You can absolutely use those instead, but the only thing you're going to be masking out is the actual effect that you put in there. You're not actually able to separate the foreground from the background and put that on its own unique layer like you are within Topaz Remask. So let's go ahead and just cut out that sky, compute my initial mask here. I'm just going to do a little bit of recovery, maybe some desaturation, and that's on the edges there, and say OK. Now each one of these programs I'm going over here today, we have specific tutorials on youtube.com/topazlabs for every single one of these. So if you want to watch something about each one of these programs, please do so there and really get to know the program a little bit more than I'm going over here with it today. All right, the next thing I want to do is add in my background. So I'm going to just actually take this particular image here and use this. There we go. Pull it over here, and all I did was drag and drop from one image, one layer, drug that layer into this particular layered area and just dropped it on top. And now you can see that this layer is on top. And I'm just going to put it below our little foreground here and resize it. If you want to know more about how to do this, I do go over this quite a bit within Remask tutorials. So please feel free again to watch that. So I'm just moving this around. We'll make this little guy a little chimney here. Okay. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to double click. Now I have this new composition here. Here's where we started. Here's where we are now. However, this doesn't really feel right. Number one, this foreground feels very, I don't know, it feels red versus this pink sunset that I just added in. So I want to kind of move it more towards the magenta or pink. I also want to maybe get a little bit more punch to this image, but I want to keep it pretty natural. So I am going to go directly into clarity this time and just bypass adjust or black and white effects. I'm going to take this foreground layer that I'm working with, this guy, specifically into clarity and not the background. So let's see here. Take that into clarity. Now it's going to bring in that whole original image, but when I process it back in, it will, let me reset that, it will only be to the foreground that got adjusted. I'm going to just kind of separate it from the full size or full screen so I can kind of try to match it at the same time with this background, match the foreground with the background. I'm going to say reset again and maybe come to my landscape images here. Let's take a look at my presets. I think I'm going to do a color and contrast boost 1. Okay, so that just gave me a little bit of punch throughout the image itself, which is great. Oops. But now I want to actually make it a little bit more magenta and match this sky that we have over here versus this red that we have going on. So I'm going to come down into this HSL adjustment. It is new to Topaz. It's the first program we have, this HSL adjustment, and it involves IntelliColor technology. So you can come in and make some pretty strong adjustments without adding any sort of artifacts or feeling unnatural beyond the color shift itself. So if I want to maybe take my reds closer to magenta, I can actually take my hue and change it that way. That feels pretty strong though, doesn't it? So let me go into my saturation and maybe take my red saturation down just a little. Luminosity, I'm going to take that down just a little as well. Let's see here. Here's before, here's after. Again, before and after. I think I'm going to take the luminosity of the whole foreground down too. So I'm going to get a different feel going here. That might be a little too much, but that's okay. Here's before, here's after. I'm just going to say okay. And it should process back just to the foreground. And it might not be perfect, but again, we're going through several programs, several workflows to kind of try to show you how you might be able to work with these. So let me show you where we were before. Here's before, more red. Here's a little bit more punch, and we went more towards that magenta color, which matches a little bit more with the sky. Might flatten this layer out and actually take it into detail next and then be done with it to complete my workflow. But right now I'm going to turn it over to you guys and kind of see what questions you have been going. I know that I've kind of not answered many as we've gone along here. So let's see what questions you have coming through. Richard says, which of the tech effects do you use first? Do you use all of them? Do you always use DJPEG if you have a JPEG image? No. The only time you should use DJPEG is if you see the problem that DJPEG will fix, or JPEG artifacts. Same thing with your denoise or InFocus. If your image has a technical problem that InFocus, denoise, or DJPEG can fix, that is when you would use the program. If you have a beautiful image, perfectly in focus, absolutely no noise or JPEG artifacts, then you completely bypass this first tier of programs and go directly into your photo effects tier of programs. If you don't want to use your photo effects and you're only interested in an artistic creation, then you can go directly to Simplify, go directly to Clean. You don't have to use all of them. You can use one, but if you're wondering when to use technical fix plugins, only use them when you have the problem that that technical plugin will fix. If you have an image that is a tiny bit blurry and you're going to blow it up to, let's say, 16 by 20 landscape or something, you're going to print it, you might want to go in and add a little capture sharpening. On top of that, if it has noise reduction and JPEG artifacts, let's see here, the order that you would use these technical fixes in that I would suggest would be InFocus, and actually I should have put DJPEG right there in the middle, InFocus to DJPEG to denoise. InFocus, if you're going to be doing capture sharpening, it's best to use that first. Then DJPEG, then denoise. The only time we suggest that you use denoise first is if you have so much image noise, it's the only thing you can look at. Similar to the first image we did here. I wouldn't take this into InFocus first no matter what, because this image noise is out of control. If this was just a little bit of image noise though in my shadows and it wasn't really obvious, then I would use InFocus first and then denoise. Ian says, what is the difference between input and output sharpening? Ian, I call it capture sharpening, capture, creative, and output. Capture sharpening is something that you use at the beginning of your workflow, straight out of the camera, to sharpen without any sort of sharpening artifacts, but it just sharpens your image just a little bit so you can really work with your image in a large format, or if you have just a little bit of image blur and you just want to crisp things up, it's a great thing. For capture sharpening is a great thing. Creative sharpening actually becomes part of the feel of your image, so it almost can be an effect. You sharpen for the look that you're trying to create. Output sharpening, you shouldn't see an actual difference in the way your image feels or looks or is. It's only specifically to the type of output that you will be doing. So if you're going to be printing at 8 by 10, then you want to make sure that your output looks good for that. Output sharpening looks good for that particular type of output you'll be doing. If you'll be putting it up on Flickr or a web sharing site, then your output sharpening would be different than if you would be printing it. So it's some more technical stuff that I could definitely get into, but I would suggest, because this session isn't really about that, you might want to watch Hal Schmidt's sharpening video that we have recorded on our Topaz Labs channels. Again, it's youtube.com/topazlabs. He kind of gives an introduction into all three of those types of sharpening and really speaks more about the output sharpening than anything else on that particular session, but a lot of good information there, and there's a lot of good tutorials on the web as well. Helene says, if using Adobe Camera Raw, should all editing possibly be done there before proceeding to Topaz, or should no adjustments be made in ACR? Helene, that is going to be different from everybody. If I'm using a raw image, my process will change, and I will do stuff in my host program or my ACR area first, and then go into whatever else I need to do. Now, if I'm working with an image straight out of the camera that looks like this, that has a huge technical problem, that needs to be handled within denoise immediately. That's my suggestion. I find it's much easier to reduce the noise in denoise if you use it first before doing any sort of adjustments such as white levels or exposure adjustments or anything like that that you might do in ACR. If you're working with a lovely image that has no technical issues, then I think that's just up to you. I know a lot of people who do most of their adjustments, especially white levels and things like that within ACR, and I would suggest that. But as you're getting into more effects and color and stuff like that, I tend to jump into Topaz. Joanne says, hey Joanne, hello. She says, can you apply all the filters to smart objects? Yes, you can. All filters should correctly work with smart objects. So if anybody's running into any issues there, just let us know, but that is something we try to make sure all of our programs do. Richard says, speaking of ISO, what ISO is this picture? This picture is, oh gosh. Oh, it was like ISO 6400 or something. Let's see here. Oh, or 25,600, a little bit more than 6,400. So again, I was shooting this particular image handheld. It was dusk, and it was, let's see here, 1/25 seconds at f4. And I was doing these types of shots to create, knowing that I would create some pretty bad image noise that I wanted to work with during testing the new denoise 5 and really making sure that we created something that could get rid of image noise as bad as this. So I like to return to this image sometimes just to see where else I can do with it. Joe says, do you recommend tone mapping in Lightroom before going to the Topaz programs? Joe, well, I mean, I don't particularly use the tone mapping in Lightroom, so I can't say whether or not which one is best to use first if you're wanting to use both. If you are wanting to use both, you can kind of think about it like this. Even though this is the Topaz workflow, this is also what I would consider more of an image workflow as well. First, you're dealing with technical issues, technical fixes, no matter what program you're using. Then you work with your effects if you're wanting more to put a warm tone, if you're wanting to do a black and white conversion, if you're wanting to add in some contrast enhancements. This is where you would work with your color, contrast, anything like that that will maybe your creative detail, not your output detail, but your creative detail. That's where the second tier jumps in. Then you go into more artistic effects that are actually going to manipulate and change your pixels. So that to me comes towards the end. Now if you don't want to do that at all, then your detail would come at the very end of your photo effects tier. So when thinking about using the adjustments within your host programs, if you are really familiar with a certain adjustment like that tone mapping option in Lightroom and you want to use it, just think about it using it in the same workflow, at least I would within the adjustment effects portion of your workflow, whether you're using Topaz Adjust or you're doing it within Lightroom. I think if you end up working with a good image, then I think that's all that's important. I can't particularly tell you which one to use first or second in that case, but I would say just keep in mind the overall image workflow. JP says, for me, it's not very clear about differences between small and middle and large detail. If you're speaking about Topaz detail, the difference is small detail is going to work with your texture detail. Medium detail is going to work with your medium image features, and then your large detail is going to work on your structural detail, which is going to be your largest image features. So if I took this image into Topaz detail, that went into Topaz detail too. Let me cancel that out. We do have Topaz detail 3.1 now, so I do want to use the latest and greatest. And let me reset all here once this processes. There we go. Okay, so small details, we're at 33%. Let me go into about 50% so you can really see. Small details, you see everything, including the hair on the butterfly's body here, really start to stand out. Here's before, here's after. Again, before and after. Very, very small details. I'm going to do this one more time. Oh, we have a bee up there too. Here's before and after. That's our small detail. Let me go back to 50%. If I now look at my medium detail, the medium detail is going to still be, the medium-sized features, but it is no longer working on those very, very small hair-like details. Here's before. Here's after. Now if I go to my large details, it's more of that structural type of detail. Really, you're going to see a lot of enhancements on the edges of things that have a lot of contrast. And it's all based upon image size, or detail size. It doesn't have an exact number, so I can't tell you that detail, small detail is going to be this amount of pixels. I used to be able to tell you that, but the technology changed in detail 3. Now it's based upon your image size. It will analyze your image, decide what are the smallest features in your image, the medium details, and what are the largest details within your image. And those are the ones that are going to create it. So again, here's your large, your medium, and now the small. Small is very small. You have to watch out for the small because it will take the smallest details and enhance them. So sometimes with these types of images that have a little bit of blur or maybe smooth areas, it will really enhance those small details, so you have to watch out there. Bill says, please take us through your procedure for setting up each Topaz filter on a separate layer. Sure, Bill. The thing that I do is I just make a duplicate of the layer. In most layered programs, including Photo Effects Lab, I'm sorry we weren't able to get in there today, all you do is you make a duplicate, not a duplicate, of the layer. And you'll usually come up with whatever the layer that you duplicated, and it'll say background copy or whatever the layer name was, copy. The way that I made this duplicate is coming down to the copy icon. So again, I'm on CS5, but this icon is consistent throughout Photoshop and Photoshop Elements. Also, you can press Control or Command J. That's the shortcut key to make a layer copy. Then all you do is you double click, and it allows you to type in what you'd like to call it. So if I know that I'm going to be taking this image into Adjust, I can just say it there, and then I'm going to be taking it into Simplify. Well, I don't want to do that yet because I want to take the adjusted layer in. So now I know I'm going to take this into Adjust. I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Adjust. And we'll go for more of let's do more of a film collection, kind of maybe a cross-process look. That's pretty. Here's before, here's after. I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to take this image into Simplify and go more for a photo painting type of feel. So what I would do is I take the adjust layer, I'd either drag it down to that icon or press Control J. Then I'm going to rename this Simplify. Now I can take my Simplify layer into Topaz Simplify. Oh no, where is it? Let's go into Topaz Clean. I don't know why it's not there. Okay, we're going to go into Clean instead. Maybe add some curly smooth effects to these flowers. Here's before. Here's after. Definitely gave me an interesting cartoon type of an effect. I'm going to say OK. Not really play around at this point. And because I didn't end up going into Topaz Simplify, you can always rename the layer. You can always double click on that layer. You don't have to stick with any sort of name. So I'm going to change that to Clean. And that's how I named the layers and changed it. And if I look at this image, 100%, I'll see all of those changes that I made in Topaz Clean. Lloyd says, can you work locally in layers? It seems everything is being done globally. Lloyd, yes, you can. You can always put a mask on. So, you know, it's you can also put masks on in most of our programs now. So let's jump on into, let's say, where did I want to go here? Okay, let's do this guy. And let's take this into Topaz Clarity. So with most of our programs, you can work locally and take it back to one layer, or you can work and add a layer mask to every single layer within the program and work locally there as well. So it is completely up to you how you'd like to work. If I wanted to add in a little bit of color and contrast boost 3. Let's see here. No, I don't really like that. Let's go to my general. And I think I'm going to take a look at my presets here. Maybe choose this. And maybe add in some micro contrast. Pretty good. Okay, so here's before, here's after. If I want to take that micro contrast and I want to take all the dynamics changes or the clarity tab changes out, I can come to my clarity mask and work locally there. I can do a quick color range tool and maybe just take it out of my sky because it doesn't look good with my clouds. I'm just going to take that size up. Again, we have an intro to Topaz Clarity that goes over all of this very specifically within the session, so you can take a look at that to get more information. Here's let me show you before though. I'm going to say OK. Pay attention to these little wisps of cloud. Here's before. So I just went ahead and took out that detail enhancement that was happening to those clouds. Now if I want to come in and let's say I want to take all the color adjustments out except for my sky, I can instead go in my hue saturation, go into my masks, and I'm going to hide everything by just clicking on my invert. And then I'm going to come into my color range again and, oh, actually we need to do it a different way, excuse me. Cancel there, go back, make a quick color range, again on my sky, size going up, sensitivity up, there we go, OK. And now I'm just going to invert, and now only my sky has been adjusted. The rest of my color adjustments have been hidden by my mask. So let me show you that before. Everything is getting enhanced, and everything is now hidden except for that sky. So you can work locally in most of our programs at this point, or especially the ones that have been updated in the last couple years, such as Adjust 5, Black and White Effects 2.1, Detail 3.1, Clarity, of course, which you're seeing right now, Photo Effects Lab, Simplify. All of these have a way to work locally within the program, whether through the local adjustment brush tools or through a masking ability. Please take a look at those intro webinars for each specific program you might be interested in learning about that. But other than that, you can also, on top of that, I'm just going to say okay, you can also work within your layers program locally as well. Now, Michael said, should you use black and white before adjust or clarity? I would just say that you need to use my personal working with clarity. It looks a little bit better after going through black and white effects or adjust. Black and white effects and adjust are basically on the same, right next to each other. The main thing you need to know about the photo effects tier is that lens effects comes at the bottom, comes last in this particular level of programs. That's because lens effects will actually come in and change the blur. It'll actually change the pixels to something else. The rest of your, I guess all of them are changing it, but this is going more, it's either blurring it or smoothing it out or adding in some pretty heavy effects if you go towards some of the effects. So I say use it last. Seems to work a little bit better. So if I wanted to come in and maybe do a quick center focus bokeh, do a effect center right here on my little kitten. Maybe take my blur amount up. I'm going to take my lens characteristics. And again, all this stuff you can learn about. We have a lot of lens effects webinars. This is lens effects 1.2, I believe it is. I might have just lied there. I forget. I'll check it out here in 1 second. Just take my focus width, my focus height down. So here you can kind of see why it's this is something I might say use after adjust or black and white effects, because now if I take this in and I try to work with maybe detail or something like slight detail enhancements within adjust, then I'm going to come in and I'm going to be trying to add detail into this really beautiful blur that I just created, and that doesn't make sense. So then I'm going to have to use all these localized tools to make sure I only get that detail enhancement or that exposure enhancement in the right area, and it's just adding more work for myself. If I use this after I've done all my exposure, color, and all that kind of contrast enhancements within clarity, adjust, and black and white effects, then I don't have to worry about trying to avoid any of this blur or effect that I've created. And somebody just asked, can you check and see which one this is? I don't know why I can't think of it. Let's see here. This particular one is 1.2. I was correct. Yay. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking around with me. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and I thank you for joining us here for the complete Topaz workflow. Let's see, if you have any questions, you can let us know at webinars@topazlabs.com. If you want to sign up for upcoming webinars, you can do so at topazlabs.com/webinars. Thanks so much again, everybody. Bye-bye.